All right, thanks. It is 8:30 on May 22nd. I'll now open the special meeting of the Grand County Commission in order to have our presentation for our Trail to Tomorrow strategic plan. Thanks, welcome, and I'll turn it over to Kathy.
Hi, thank you very much, Commissioner. And thank you all for being here, especially after such a long night last night. We have a very, we hope, entertaining and informative 90 minutes for you this morning. We have a presentation. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. We submitted it last week so that you had a chance to see this in advance. What we're going to share with you today is, believe it or not, an abbreviated version of what we sent to Ben and team earlier this week. There's a 132-page version of this, and we hope it serves you as a resource and a reference for many years to come. You'll see as we go through this presentation today that there is a great depth of information that we have been uncovering in the work that we've done so far. Let me quickly introduce the members of our team. Co-lead Mitch Nichols from Nichols Tourism Group, David Becker from RRC Associates out of Boulder, and Jeremy Sage, who is also with RRC Associates, but based in Missoula and does quite a bit of work with the national parks. We've introduced ourselves so many times. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep it short so we can spend more time on these slides. I do just want to note, though, it was just almost exactly a year ago that we submitted our proposal for this project. And so that's been quite an interesting process ever since. You know, as I'm sure all of you know, this project has sort of proceeded, sort of throttled up and throttled down a few times. And so we really got underway in October, and then we've had a few schedule changes along the way due to various conflicts. But I think we're at a critical point now today where we're going to be sharing the findings, the major findings, with all of you. We're going to be engaging with the steering committee later this morning in what we call an ideation session to really go over the main components of the plan, the planning framework. And then we have community forums tonight and tomorrow morning to hear from your community. So we'll be at a dead run the whole time that we're here this time around. Any questions or comments before we get going?
Did we get the full? I was just looking through you.
I don't think I saw that actually, Kathy. And I've had a super busy couple of weeks, but
yeah. Well, we submitted it through the normal channels.
Okay. I just want to make sure I was missing something.
It was on the link. Okay. For the meeting. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Kathy.
No worries.
Yes. Anyway, I will definitely check it out if I have any questions after your presentation, and then also our next meeting.
All right. Well, we will break the suspense shortly. So Here we go.
All right.
Oh, let's see. Oh, Ashley, I'm here. Where do I point this, Ashley? That's not. Do I need to turn it on? No. Oh, here we go. It wasn't on. Yes, it was on. Not quite sure what to do. Sorry. Test. Okay. Hopefully that's the one and only glitch today. It's been so long since I've used a mouse. Let's see.
Mouse right there.
Whoops. Oh. Okay.
Am I really confronting the computer?
No. No.
It's a little video.
I was right clicking.
Yeah. So I just want to.
Look.
Let's try this. There we go. Just arrow up.
We will prevail over
just arrow up and arrow down.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sky. Okay. Yay. Okay. I won't spend time on the table of contents, just to sort of give you, we'll almost use this as the agenda. So we're going to give you an overview of the Trail to Tomorrow findings. We'll give you a wrap up of all the stakeholder engagement that we've been doing. Our RRC team will spend some time with you talking about an assessment of the economic vitality in the county. Mitch will fill you in on the vitality of the tourism sector. back to RRC for the evaluation of community assets and infrastructure. And then, I can't read that last line.
Opportunity for Grand Canyon.
Thank you. Whoops. The purpose of the plan, we've shared this definition in several settings, but we wanted to create some clarity from the get-go about what this plan was all about. And the idea is to achieve greater harmony between your local economic realities and what residents prioritize. The idea is to create this Trail to Tomorrow strategic plan to manage tourism more sustainably while continuing to develop a diverse economy over the next 5 years. And of course, we've been conducting this with a commitment to hearing all voices. This planning process is intended to enhance local quality of life, as well as the experience of those who visit or do business here, while safeguarding the special nature and culture of Grand County. So this was the statement we agreed on early on, and all of our work truly has been faithful to this purpose statement ever since. The guiding principles we established early on were intended. In fact, I think all of you have heard this, but there may be people listening in who haven't. So let me just quickly explain. We wanted to make certain that we were establishing principles early on so that people who were participating in the process really knew about sort of the ground rules that were being established from the get-go about how this process would be conducted. This is something we're holding ourselves to. This is something that we've been sharing in the stakeholder sessions. We developed this with the help of the steering committee, but we proceeded throughout with a focus on transparency, listening, learning, stewardship, and alignment. And really what we're doing today is an exercise in all of that, because we've been asking people all along to rely on the data, rely on the findings, set your own personal views aside, or at least test them against what we're uncovering through this process, because we know people in this county have a lot of very firmly held beliefs. And so we're inviting people to be open to some new possibilities with this process. Still having trouble here. Hitting arrow down. It's not happening.
So sometimes if I go to sleep, just hit the space bar.
I see.
Woke
Yep.
up again.
Yep. Very good.
There we go. Okay, project overview. Just to ground you in that, desktop research, that's what we're sharing today. Well, we're sharing all of this today. In-depth interviews, a business sentiment survey has been conducted, visitor profile, 4 steering committee meetings, including one today, one upcoming, 14 topical roundtables. We learned so much, and I know some of you participated in those roundtables as well. 4 community forums. We're doing our final 2 this time around. The ideation session, as I said, is later this morning. And then the final result will be your Trail to Tomorrow plan. Okay, so I'll take you through the summary of our stakeholder engagement very quickly. Oh no, first up, Mitch will be talking about the Utah resident opinions on tourism.
Well, one of the just slightly here. One of the factors that we heard a lot about was resident attitudes and quality of life and those kinds of factors. Many of you are familiar with some of the work that Ken Gardner has put together. And back in late 2021, the study was published in early 22. And this is a really important study, because it not only surveyed residents within Moab and the Grand County region, but they did that in 14 different regions around the state. And so what's really powerful with this survey is that we're able to benchmark the results from residents in the Moab area to others all around Utah. One of the concerning factors is that pretty consistently Moab area residents showed that they had far greater concerns as it related to the visitor industry as any of the other 13 counties. Moab residents oftentimes talked about the potential of providing that visitor with a positive visitor experience. And you can see a variety of these questions were rated on a 1 to 5 scale, with 5 being good. And Moab was rated at 3.5. So on the big scale of things, that's about middle, which is okay. But even with that, Moab was the lowest of any of the other 13 destinations. While this was done a couple of years back, we still think most of these findings are still very relevant and appropriate today. If anything, some of those concerns might have moderated a little bit because of some of the slowing in terms of the visitor industry that has occurred over the last 12, 18-month period of time. We have a lot more detail in that full package that Kathy had mentioned, but let me just talk about a variety of these factors. So of the 14 regions surveyed, 58% of the Moab residents talked about that there were many places where visitation exceeded what the area was able to accommodate. So that capacity constraints, those residents were most concerned of any area of the state in terms of what was actually being overutilized in the carrying capacity that was available. 99% said the area had a great deal of tourism, and 47% said their household income depended on tourism-related activities. In terms of general negative scores, Moab in general had those negative scores, the most negative scores in terms of the visitor industry's impacts on natural environment, housing affordability, and the locals' ability to access recreational opportunities. And that was an interesting one, that even though all of this is right outside their front door, many noted the concerns in terms of working 2 or 3 jobs and just their ability to get out and enjoy what's in their own backyard. Just to touch on 3 more facets that we felt were particularly concerning when the questions were posed in terms of focusing on the effects of tourism in your community. Which of the following statements would you say is most accurate? And for Moab, 22%, only 22% said that the positive effects of tourism outweigh the negatives. In our area, our way of life has changed to suit the visitors. And boy, 4.5 on a 5-point scale, really concerned about how the area has changed to respond to visitor needs. And then the final one here, tourism has made locals prouder of the area. Moab had the lowest score, 2.31 on that 5-point scale. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't already generally understand and know, but I think that Gardner study really helped us understand sort of the scale of those perspectives and ideas related to other areas of Utah. We're again incorporating quite a bit more detail in the full deck, but those were a handful of some of the more concerning findings and statistics that project and survey surfaced.
We understand that the Kim Gardner Institute is planning to update the resident survey and do it statewide again. So you should have a new update of that sentiment very soon. Okay, the next up is the roundtable takeaways. We told you we did 14 of these. We covered a wide range of topics. This will be in your packet, so I won't be reciting these for you, but let us just share the top takeaways. In the full version of the report, you will have takeaways for each one of the 14 roundtables, but let me just share the main findings with you right now. Okay, so overall, and we heard this time and again, and by the way, these takeaways are things that we heard not just from one person. This is a synthesis of the main themes out of those roundtables. But the first one really is about the fact that the county's tourism-related businesses believe that the brand of the counties believe the businesses believe that their tourism-related businesses and the Grand County brand have been battered by a lot of pushback against tourism. The bumper stickers that people see on the cars around here, like Moab is crowded and overrun, tell your friends, are hurting your brand. And one of the quotes from those conversations for all of the talk of diversification, this is our economy. When you hit the brakes on tourism promotion, there was a lot of sentiment from businesses in town and in the county that you failed to include them in that conversation. A lot of them said that they were scrambling at the last minute to try to get promotion themselves out into the market. So many of them are mom and pop shops. They don't have the resources and time to do this on their own. Graham County Public Lands, this came out so many ways, has a wide diversity of users, nothing you don't know, but ultimately the need is there to provide a solid quality experience for everyone and make sure no user group diminishes the experience of another group. So that really comes down to, a strategy to eliminate those user conflicts. And there's a recognition that not every acre of public land is going to be able to be used for every activity. That really was a belief back in the day, but people are coming around to the realization, it's been a hard realization, that breakup planning is essential to eliminate those user conflicts. People pointed to the trail mix community. Horseback, mountain biking, and hiking trail users as a good model for what could happen to really sort out user conflicts between other groups. Nothing again you don't know. Moab Grand County is being branded as unfriendly for off-roaders. Other destinations are positioning their offerings against you. And you will see from some of the data that's going to be presented later that off-roaders actually represent a pretty valuable segment of your economy. The off-roading community feels embattled and unappreciated for the steps many of them feel they've taken to mitigate the impacts. They don't expect perfect agreement, that they'll never have to discuss things with you again, but they believe that if they were approached in an inclusive way on targeted issues, they probably support more restrictions. One thing they noted was that closing the backcountry trails actually concentrates more noise near town, because it takes away the trails from the loudest users. Those are the folks that people who own their own equipment are the ones who are most likely to use the backcountry trails, they say. We know this is an issue that Grand County and Moab have been grappling with for years, but we heard so much discussion about the need for a bypass for the county to be at its best, to reduce the noise issues, to reduce safety concerns. There was a suggestion, and apparently this was something that happened some years ago, that there was outreach and work with the BLM to identify a highway corridor on public lands, as it did in the 70s. Is that a possibility? Everyone talked about the beauty of the natural environment here. Some people call it the most beautiful place on earth. They say that's central to the area's quality of life, but too many people don't have time to experience it because they're working 2 or 3 jobs. The county, we know, a major interest in this study was to build the economy in new and productive ways, but we heard again and again, you can't grow economically until people can afford to live here. Keeping and hiring employees, we heard this across the board. It's a major challenge. We're struggling to keep people hired because of how much of a struggle it is to live here. We heard lots of stories about people losing employees because somebody else was paying $1 an hour. Or if somebody decided not to show up for work one day, no problem, because they could get a job the next day, no problem. That's how tough it is. Many service workers don't have a year-round job because Grand County doesn't have a 52-week economy. So that's a challenge, obviously, to be addressed. Restaurateurs say they face so many issues. Costs are way up, visitation is down, locals aren't eating out as much, international travelers aren't back. The food truck court has sapped their business. Lots of challenges for that sector of your economy, which, as you'll see, is a big component of your taxable sales. Your hopes for development, we'll talk about this more in our ideation session today, but there's many significant barriers to your hopes for economic development. But many of them are solvable. More buildable land can be made available in open spaces away from US 91. Understand that this is a conversation in your planning department by updating your general plan's land use requirements to support new nodes for development off of US 91. There's also a possibility, we heard in these roundtables, of opening up development at the airport and your vast open spaces near Thompson Springs and Crescent Junction by building water lines from places where the county already has water rights. We've heard that you have ample wastewater capacity. That doesn't appear to be a limiting factor. Cost of development can be prohibitive. Heard that in many different contexts. Another reason attracting businesses to Grand County is difficult. We heard a lot about barriers to development, and not that a collaborative or cooperative spirit of trying to work together to solve problems. We heard examples where that did happen, but we also heard of examples where there wasn't that ability to move something forward because of just sort of hitting roadblocks instead of problem-solving attitudes. Key for development is going to be turning people with talents and creativity into entrepreneurs. We'll talk to you more about this in weeks to come. That's going to be a topic that we'll be addressing in the ideation session later today. One of the ideas that came up that just holds a lot of promise, we believe, is really shaping Moab as a dream wedding destination. You had a young couple come and establish a business not too long ago. They say there's more business than they can handle. They believe there's enough business for 3 different florists in this town. Wedding isn't just a one-day thing. Destination weddings are popping up. Mitch will talk about this later, but it supports a lot of different occupations. You also have a lot of potential as an arts destination. And interestingly, your community said art is a non-contentious tourism activity. That's one that fits well with the culture here. Thank you, Mitch. My own slides. Okay. Another reason that attracting business to Grand County is difficult when it comes to permitting. Oh, no, I did that one. Okay, never mind. I'm at the end.
Community
I'm
forum.
so sorry. Okay, let me give you any comments from those roundtable takeaways, and there's lots more, as I said, in the full deck. But any thoughts about what we just shared with you?
And one point on that, we try to incorporate here some of the recurring themes that we were hearing, and with 14 of these, we really had a pretty broad mix of folks, and certainly some of those might feel on track or off track, but we just wanted to make sure that we were bringing to your attention. Here's what we were hearing when we asked them to share their thoughts and ideas and some of the recurring themes, some of them concerning, some of them optimistic, but that was I think back to Kathy's one of the first slides about hearing all voices, really important. And that was one of the key things for those listening sessions that we wanted to make sure to bring forth some of those recurring themes that we were hearing on a recurring basis.
Keep going? Okay, all right. So here's some quick insights from the community forums that we held back in January. We asked a series of questions using this engagement platform called Mentimeter. First question was really, what are the biggest challenges for the Grand County economy? And you can see housing and wages pop to the top. A lot of other issues were identified too, but you'll see stable housing. There was another reference to housing in there too. We also wanted to get people's ideas on how important each of the industry sectors were for Grand County. These consistents were very similar. This is pulled from the January 18th session, but these findings are very similar to the ones on January 17th as well. Outdoor recreation is almost off the charts, 9.4 on a 10-point scale. Everybody saw that.
6%. Can we get back to that last slide? The word remote is really interesting to me.
Remote.
In a lot of context, it's huge. And
Yeah,
that could have positive or negative connotations.
you're right.
It's interesting as to what that might
Yeah,
lead to.
you could say it's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
Because people do come here for the peace and the solitude. And so being remote obviously is a positive, it's an opportunity. But I think what they're talking about is it's so remote from so many things. Just even trying to get people here.
And I do think that's the concerning element in terms of distance, whether it's from Salt Lake City or others, in terms of just access, and part of that related to air access as well.
The other thing that brings to mind instantly is remote work also, that also has positive.
Exactly.
We're going to be talking more about that because I think you're right on target there. And, with the attractiveness of Moab is this amazing for those footloose entities and how that could be a bigger part of economic diversification. Very important.
So I participated in one of these sessions, but I think the question prompting these was asking for challenges or negatives. So I think, okay, for purposes of this question,
Yeah.
remote, so.
Yeah.
Negative, we're not positive.
You're absolutely right.
Just opt out.
Yeah. And yeah, how important is each of these industry sectors? I think one interesting thing to note, apart from the other strong skew toward outdoor recreation, is tourism is number two. Those two are obviously closely intertwined, but people thought a lot of your industries were important, which kind of points to an already somewhat diversified economy. The things that ranked the lowest here were mining, manufacturing, and energy. Forestry was down there a bit too.
The other thing that struck me was the relatively strong belief that arts, culture, and entertainment was already an important segment, and certainly one that we think holds even greater potential for the region in the future.
Right, and then on to what kind of visitors would you like for Greene County to attract? One of the reasons we ask this question is because targeting the kinds of visitors that your residents want to attract is one of the ways of diffusing conflict in a tourism economy. A lot of times conflict happens with tourism because the people who are showing up are just out of step with what's going on in a community. But the more you can do to align your visitors with local ethics about how to care for the land is going to be a productive path for you. And that is definitely shown by that bottom line. The kinds of visitors people most want to attract here are those who care for natural resources. There are ways of targeting those kinds of travelers. The second most interesting group for people were those who take guided experiences. Jeremy's going to be sharing some findings pretty soon about the importance of that for your economy already. And those whose spending contributes most to the local economy, another important one. Guess who they're not interested in? And I find this across the West. I ask this question in a lot of different settings. People interested in less visited places. And the answer I always get is, we want to keep those places for ourselves. We don't want visitors everywhere.
And Kathy, I might just add, that's a challenging one, because from a sustainability kind of perspective, in many instances, part of that solution is how do we diversify and disperse those visitor flows and away from some of the most loved environments and experiences. But for many of the locals, they're concerned about that. That's their spaces. Those are the less utilized. Don't push them. And so there's that dichotomy that certainly came up there.
And then this next slide really goes to what people's hopes and dreams and aspirations are here. Imagine it's 2029. When you look around Greene County, what do you want to see? They want to see healthy people living in comfortable homes. A lot of it is about housing, less traffic on Main Street, clean streets, people walking, stores thriving. So this is almost pointing to what that vision statement should be for the future. Okay, I'll turn it over to Jeremy. We've got a lot more to share with you.
Great, thanks. And before I start on this business sentiment study findings, just want to remind you of what Mitch said a few minutes ago about the Kim Gardner resident sentiment that was done in late 21, early 22, just so you can keep those numbers in mind when we see these numbers here and think about who is responding to that. So the Kim Gardner one was more just residents at large. This one was more business sentiment, which is more about those people that are owning or managing businesses in the Moab, Grand County areas there. So what Mitch told you earlier was that 50% said there were many places where visitation exceeded the area was able to accommodate. Well, can you turn the mic towards me?
Yeah.
Anybody online? 99% had said that there was a great deal of tourism. 47% said that their household income was dependent upon tourism-related activities. And the last one I wanted to
One thing I think
I'm reiterating what you had said.
Twice, yeah.
Okay, so and then of that survey that Mitch talked about, 22% of them said that the positive effects outweigh the negative impacts of tourism. So let me go to the key takeaways here on the business sentiment survey, which was conducted earlier this spring. Let me roll myself down there. And as we've already heard so far today, housing popped up as a major concern expressed by the business folks that are there. And I'll show you the graph on that in just a second, with 70% of them saying that this was a concern of theirs. Respondents also were strongly agreeing that visitors do benefit the local economy and helping sustain residents' quality of life. There's often a relationship between the ability to build up a visitor economy and building up that quality of life that goes along as well. You add restaurants for those visitors that are there, which also adds diversity and food options for local residents to enjoy as well. Assuming they're not waiting in an hour-long line for during the peak season that's there. More than half of the folks in this survey did rate the quality of life currently as good or excellent, but they also shared that quality of life is declining in their perspective. More than 3/4 of the folks in this survey itself said it is important to focus on the economic health of Grand County. And there has been also a strong support for expanding entrepreneurship, expanding arts and culture, hearing that again, and also expanding the options to build on that shoulder or the off-peak seasons as we go. So this first graphic that we'll get to gets back to that thought we had just a second ago about the large number of folks that were identifying either constraints or opportunities or in things that are inhibiting or enhancing opportunities for economic development. So if we scroll all the way down there to the bottom, and we see that housing availability and cost of housing both scored is very inhibiting. 70% of folks were saying it's very inhibiting for economic development opportunities in Grand County. But we had a couple stronger pieces on the internet connectivity and health pieces there. But if you look at the overall scores on a lot of these, they tend, if you look at the average, almost all these options here are tending towards the somewhat inhibiting to neutral piece on there. So about a 2.9 all the way down to that cost of housing down there at 1.5. So there's opportunities for identifying how can we start to focus on some of these pieces to turn these into enhancers as opposed to inhibitors as we move forward. Going on to our next piece, looking at that agreement disagreement scale on this about the opportunities that are out there around the tourism economy that's there. And so asking these folks about, do visitors benefit the local economy? And 58%, 88% overall agree that visitors do benefit that local economy, that visitor spending helps sustain residents' quality of life. So large agreement with that piece that's there. Come back down there to the bottom. On a positive side, we want to see that visitors disrupt the quality of life being low. So that's a good piece. But also that current infrastructure and visitor services can support the volume of tourism in the region. So there's a large disagreement about that. So there's a recognition on the top right-hand corner there that there's good benefits to local economy, but also there's those constraints that suggest that the infrastructure and services are not quite there to meet that need. So how do we bring those two pieces together? What are those opportunities there? And that's where we see a lot of this effort now as we listen to these folks, to the community forums, to each and every piece that we heard about. How do we bring those two pieces closer into alignment?
Keep in mind, this is the business community.
This is the business community, yep, exactly.
And I do want to note that we have a full deck of the business sentiment survey findings and the visitor perception study findings. We're giving you a very high level overview today, but you'll have the full deck too. Review at your leisure.
Right. And then, so in addition to the business sentiment, we also went out and asked visitors, what do you think of Moab? What are the are you aware of Moab? How was your last visit? What did you do in last visit? Did you hire a guide? Oh, sorry.
Just briefly, how are you selecting visitors to interview?
So we did this in two different panels. So we worked with Sky and Ben and their crew to bring in a list of folks that had signed up for the visit or Discover Moab emails in that way. So there's a very targeted group that's there. Those are people that have already expressed interest in Moab, want to know more, find out more information. So there's some already detailed interest there. And then we had 1,000 folks from a random panel that we did online. And we asked some questions. We framed this survey such that they didn't know it was coming from Grand County, from Moab. It's sort of like, hey, we want to know about your outdoor recreation interest, your travel interest. And then as we got through there, we asked them about, are you aware of Moab? What's your perception of Moab? Have you been to Moab? And then what did you do if you had?
So the numbers here, are they from the large thing or the smaller panel? Or
there's varying on this. So, yeah. And so the key takeaways here that we saw that across both those panels, the people that have been to Moab, whether they're on, doesn't matter which panel they were on average, they were staying about 3.3 days in Moab or in Grand County, which was part of it. So it's about a third of their overall trip was on there. So it's a drive market, as we're all largely aware of, a drive market where they're experiencing a lot of southern Utah, a lot of potentially Colorado, Nevada, a lot of these other outdoor rec kind of travel spaces that are out there. A lot of these visitors that have come to Moab say they do want to return in the next 3 years. So this is a stated, like, I would like to do that, either somewhat or very likely to do this. So half of those visitors said there's at least a 75% chance they want to come back in the next 3 years. So that's a great piece to see that's on there. Is like, I've been here and I want to get back. So that experience is at least theoretically meeting that expectation that's there. And so they came, potentially they saw arches and saw some folks out riding bikes or in Jeeps, and like, I want to come back and experience that piece as well. So some opportunities that are there. This third bullet down here, that most of Moab's repeat visitors say that their most recent experience was better, 31%, or about the same, 64%, as what their prior visits were. There's only a small portion, 5%, that said it was worse than what it was prior to that, which this is an interesting thought to consider about what we were hearing from residents about that concern about being able to provide a quality experience for visitors and listening to visitors talk about their quality experiences that are there. So there's an opportunity for messaging there. How do we communicate out to residents what that important piece is? Not to tell them that they're wrong in what they're perceiving, but how do we message what's going on in the greater economy out to those folks? So a big portion of economic development, tourism, is that communication within the destination, within the county, within Moab. That's there. So as we go on to the first graphic on here, what we want to identify here is, of all these folks that were on there, this is a combination of anybody that entered our survey that had been to Moab recently on vacation or some kind of overnight getaway. We saw that in overall, right, 72% of those folks had come and visited a national park, whether it was Arches or Canyonlands. A lot of them are out there scenic driving. Good chunks of folks are out there taking pictures. I mean, why would you take a picture if you come here and don't take a picture? You're missing out on reliving your experience and sharing with all your friends. But maybe that's also a bad thing that creates some problems as well. Sharing too many of those unexplored places with your friends, encouraging more to go to those unexplored places. If you look at that Discover Moab list, so that's the one that they're targeted because they'd already expressed interest. 31% of those folks said that they were doing some off-roading their last time they were here, whereas more on average in the random panel that we had, that was about 15%. So there's a bit less on average in that group that's there. But largely, a strong group of our folks that are coming in here are visiting those national parks. And the key to that is, and we'll get to this in a second, that is business parks and ... right? So it's not just those parks that's attracting them. There's other things that are here, and we'll get to that in a second of how important that is. So go to the next slide, and we look at that trip length by activity that's there. So we said earlier that 3.3 days on average are spent in the greater Moab area out of that 9-10-day trip overall. If we look at the folks up there, our second one from the top, those are visiting Arches. We can see that they're here, or they're on their trip quite a long time, so a little over 11 days on average, and they're visiting they're visiting Moab for about 4 days of that. So these findings that we see in here are very similar to surveys that we have conducted in Arches and other national parks in southern Utah that show pretty similar relationships with what this is showing us, that it's part of an overall longer trip that they're experiencing across a journey. Among the visitors that have longest stays were directed at Moab and Grand County, were those off-roaders, mountain bikers, and climbers. Smaller groups, especially get down towards the climbers, but they are spending a higher proportion of their overall visit in the greater Moab area. So there's some variation that goes along there, but the key thing, like think about like Arches and Canyonlands, is those are long trips. Those are also large volumes of people that are answering those questions. So if we go on to the next slide and looking at that intent to return, so some thoughts are that there's an opportunity for people who have been to Arches, been to Canyonlands as their kind of first introduction to Moab and to southern Utah, and then bring them back for other things as well. So we saw that 77% of folks in these surveys had said they went to Arches during the last trip. 48% of those folks said they would plan to come back. If you look at those that are hiking, it's around 60% of those that went on hikes. 49% of those said they wanted to come back. We get to some of these smaller groups, you get larger and larger people that want to come back. They're seeing these adventures, these activities that are here, and it's driving them back. One key piece that would be interesting to explore further is, of those people that said they went to Arches, and then they said they also did these other things. By doing these other things, is that creating a dedicated audience that says they want to come back? So if you just go to Arches, come in, come out, and go away, might not want to come back. You come into Arches, you get a guide, right? You experience more of what Grand County and Moab have to offer, enticing that opportunity to come back there as well. Those guides then provide a valuable service out to those folks, to the county and to the city as well, in terms of educating individuals about the ecosystem, about caring for the natural environment, about communities, and building more and more advocates for the region that's there.
Just one quick comment. These two last slides also point to who your highest value travelers are. So the people who are most likely to come back and the people who stay the longest on their stays represent good categories of travelers for you to target, because those are the ones who are going to yield the most return. And typically the visitors who stay longer are the ones who create less impact on your tourism infrastructure too. Fewer sheets to change, fewer towels to wash, all that sort of thing. So anyway, I think you're getting some really good guidance about which categories of outdoor recreation.
John, it looks like base jumping was by far the biggest percentage, and
Yes.
that's by nature to be it.
Oh,
It's very
it's a
tiny.
tiny,
Yeah.
it's a tiny
I was gonna make-
portion, but they're almost 100% likely to
Sure.
come back.
Yeah.
So the more base, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
But still,
If
I
we go down,
if they survive.
yeah,
I just want to echo what Jean, I mean, looking at this thing, we should be focusing on, weddings and base jumping. But, there's a limited number of people in the world who are having a wedding or want to go base jumping. And so whereas I think there's unlimited supplies of people who want to see a national park. So-
right. And if we
Yeah.
go to a slide here, can skip ahead like 2 slides real quick.
You know what, let me respond to that the wedding one, because right now it's a small proportion. If you lean into Moab as a dream destination for weddings, you're increasing the supply of people who came here for a wedding visit and are almost 100% likely to come back.
When we were working in Sonoma County, they put heavy emphasis on the weddings, and that was the fastest growing segment that they had as they concentrated. But so I think you're absolutely on base of looking where we're at today, but at the same time saying, are there some of these segments that we can grow and that are high value visitor segments that could be representative of who we'd like to have more of?
Yeah, often we'll see like these big draws of Arches, Canyonlands. These bring in a lot of people, and it's their first time experience. They might not have planned appropriately for their longer stay, so they experience Arches. They might experience one Jeep ride, and they want to then come back and experience more of those opportunities. So you have just 40% of Arches visitors that want to come back, but by providing those other opportunities with guided experiences, with other spaces, can bump those pieces that are up on there by making sure that they're aware and doing some quality planning for, not just 3.3 nights in Moab, but 3.8 nights, 4.1 nights, expanding that opportunity that's there. If you go back to one of the slides earlier that Kathy mentioned of some of the community thoughts that are out there of who you want to reach out to, that was a lot of folks that are taking guided activities and people that spend a lot of money. And we've seen in other destinations in states where the folks that are buying a guided experience, those are your longer staying visitors. And those are your higher spending visitors as well. Whether we're talking about hunting, fishing, river rafting, mountain biking, off-roading, whatever it might be, those groups tend to spend quite a bit of money and stay quite a while it's there. So this is perhaps my favorite graph in this slide. And I think it's a pretty positive graph overall for Moab. I just like the way it was set up and arranged, thanks to some of our analysts that created this. So we asked the respondents in these surveys about their perceptions of Moab across a range of attributes. So friendly people, customer service, positive vibe, natural beauty. And we also asked this question of everybody that was answering the survey. And then everybody also got 2 other destinations to be asked about. And so everybody, was about 900 or 1,000 people that were asked about Moab, and about 300 across each of the other destinations that are there about these same questions, positive vibe. We saw that Moab, the ones in orange there, if you can't read it, those ones are Moab. And then the other destinations there, like Bend, Asheville, Durango, Fruita, Sedona, Springdale, St. George, Whitefish. The really key pieces there, natural beauty. Moab ranks well above anybody else in that piece. You go to the third one over there, and the overall scores, Moab is the highest rated piece that's there. You go to safety and security, Moab is one of the top pieces there. You go to friendly people, Moab is one of the top pieces that are there. Go to variety of lodging, coming down the bottom piece of that. Dining and food, culture coming down towards the bottom of that. Positive piece though is the bottom is still pretty stinking high. Bottom is still a 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. So those are not bad options by any means. But overall, the quality of the perception of what Moab is strong across all these kind of destinations that are out there. So I think this is a very encouraging graphic coming out of this effort.
Outdoor experiences, you're sort of off the chart. And natural beauty, you're off the chart. The orange dot is Moab.
I mean, that's almost a perfect score there, 4.74.
And in the survey where, I mean, are you asking this of people who've actually been to these places, or this just what they think about?
So what they think about Moab. So we asked, which of these communities are you at least familiar with? And so fairly familiar, somewhat, very. And as long as they said they were at least somewhat aware of it, we asked them, kind of, what's your perception of it? So whether they've been there or not, wasn't really relevant to this question. What is really neat also, and speaks well to Moab, is we also don't show it in this deck, but we cross-tab these answers by those that have been to Moab. And what you don't want to see is the perceptions drop, the people that come, right? Because that means you're not meeting their expectations. We saw these all hold or at least somewhat jump up a little bit. So that's a really good sign to see that the expectations or what you imagine Moab or Grand County to be holds true when they get here and experience Moab. So that's a really positive sign coming out of that. Then we go into the next piece, and this gets kind of back to your question about the number of people that are slacklining or base jumping. Those are really small representation that's in there. Arches was up at 77%, 61% visiting Canyonlands, hiking, dining, Dead Horse State Park, photography. Those are all some of those higher volume pieces that are there. The interesting piece then, if you go to the graphic on the right-hand side, is, if you went to Arches, what else did you do? Nearly 70% also hiked and went to Canyonlands. 50% of those folks were dining, going to Dead Horse. Nice 21%. So a fifth of the people that are going that said they went to Arches also said they did some kind of off-road experience. Good chunk of these folks are also going to be novice travelers, novice outdoor extreme adventurers, are going to likely be taking a guided trip as well. So those are good pieces to see how you can match up those interests that are there. And then we go to that guided experience. Do you want to? No. Oh, okay, sorry. Looking at what, did you get a guided experience for any of the activities? And overall, almost 40% of folks said they had some kind of guide or another during their trip. Most likely was the river activities, followed by horseback riding, slacklining, backcountry skiing. Some of those are, if you look on the right-hand side, some pretty small ends, but the ones to key in on those river activities. So 83% said that. Off-roading is another solid 47% on there. So key pieces that are on there, right? If you're going to Arches, if you're coming down here creating guided experiences, these are also those end pieces that are matching with what locals tell us that they want to experience or want to attract, right? People that are taking those guided experiences, people that are spending money that positively contributes to the economic conditions in the county. And then lastly, we also wanted to know about some of the impacts of the Arches timed entry system, as they may have experienced it if they were here in the last couple of years. And so keep in mind that we didn't put a time limit on when they would have or could have visited Grand County. So it could have been anywhere in their past. So of those folks that responded that they have been to Arches, 65% of those folks did not need a reservation on the most recent visit. Either it was they were in an off-peak time when it was in place, or it was pre-reservation period. Of those who did tell us that they needed to have a reservation, so 91 folks, almost everybody was well aware that they needed that prior to their trip. So 93% of folks said yes, they knew that they needed to have that reservation in place. Only 4% said they were unaware. Of those folks that said they did not go to Arches, which does happen, some people don't go to Arches. Almost about half of them said that no, it just wasn't on my experience. It's a good indication that that's likely that you could probably cross-check this actually, that this is maybe their second time coming to Moab, or third time. They experienced Arches already, now they're wanting to come back and do other pieces that are there. So most of the folks that said they were not going there said it just wasn't on their itinerary for that trip. 18% of folks said it was just too crowded. Those are largely folks that were coming prior to the reservation system, that they would get to the gate, see that those lines at the gate being swung closed, and indicating that. 12% said they were unable to get a reservation when they were here. And getting down to really small sample sizes here, but half of those said that they couldn't get a reservation, said that they didn't know it was one. But again, that's a very small portion. Most people that didn't need a reservation were aware that they had a reservation going on there.
Jeremy, you said you're seeing these results across the national parks. People are becoming more.
Right. As there's been an itching for years for reservations of some sort as we've gone on, but a lot of blocks to that occurring as COVID unwound or wound up, whichever you want to term that is. We saw a handful of parks start to initiate these, whether it was Zion for their shuttle systems and having reservations, whether it was for Arches and their time of entry, Rocky, Glacier. Initial reactions were very hesitant and angry. There's still a good handful of those, especially locally, and how that matches up with other reservations. But as far as awareness and understanding on the visitor side of it, that's definitely increasing and increasingly accepting of those experiences. We saw pretty positive responses from Estes Park visitors as well on some of these kind of similar questions. And it takes sort of David into taxable sales.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah. A change here, a lot of the based and attitudinal sort of qualitative feedback we got to more quantitative understanding of the nature of the economy in Moab, how it's evolved over time, has it diversified, what's the composition. So a variety of indicators we looked at first, taxable sales. So over the past 10 years, Grand County's taxable sales have grown very significantly, about 80%, 2014 to 2023. And that's when you sort of adjust for the US inflation rate, there's still a 40% real increase in taxable sales past 10 years. So pretty healthy growth there. That growth has occurred across most industry sectors, both kind of tourism focused sectors as well as non-tourism focused sectors. We'll see a graph that goes into that in more detail. Taxable sales surged in 2021. There was a lot of demand coming out of COVID. Also a lot of inflation occurring at that time as well. We'll see what those patterns look like in the graph later. After that huge surge in 2021, there's been sort of a leveling off, slight increase, but much more moderate growth in taxable sales for the past couple of years, even some declines in some sectors like lodging. There's also been some shifts in the seasonality of sales. In particular, there's been proportionate growth over the past 10 years in March and September, and slight declines in July and August, as we'll see in another graph coming up. So, so this graph illustrates the trailing 12-month sum of taxable sales by area of Grand County. You can see sort of the divot when COVID hit, and then sort of this huge surge kind of in that spring, summer 2021 period. And then sort of gradual, generally upward trend since then. Great to see that those gains from 2021, that you've held on to those, so you've got a larger tax base now. You can also see that Moab accounts for about 70% of taxable sales. The remainder of the county accounts for about 30%. And that ratio is actually held pretty steady. Back in 2010, it's also about 70% Moab, 30% remainder of Grand County. So it shifts, it shares somewhat here and there. But interesting that those grand proportions overall held pretty steady. Looking at sales by industry sector, or by broad super sector, you can see there's a mix of activity occurring across sales, services, which includes things like restaurants, hotels, utilities, retail trade, which is very diverse, everything from grocery stores to auto dealers to clothing stores and so forth. Business investment is things like construction, manufacturing, wholesale trade, sales that businesses might make, and then just a small volume of sales in another category. But all of those have shown growth over time. When we sort of break out those super sectors into more detail, you can see the orange line shows that 10-year growth trend. And again, that overall average across all sectors again is about 80%. You can see some sectors overperformed that, such as accommodations, or the doubling of accommodation sales over the past 10 years. Food services and treating places as well, another big sector that's outperformed in terms of growth. Arts, entertainment, recreation, big one. Non-store retailers, it's grown the most. The Amazons of the world that sort of deliveries of essentially purchases from online retailers, stricken most of that. You can see accommodations, growth divot through COVID, and a huge surge after that. Similar pattern with food services and treating places. More continual growth in several other sectors. This graph illustrates the seasonality of taxable sales. So summed up across 12 months, a given year, sums to 100%. So proportionally, you can see sort of an uptrend in both March and October, in contrast to declines in July and August, suggesting potentially some shifts in the seasonality, economic activity, and likely driven by tourism. Sort of either the nature of trips or when people are coming. Possibly some indication that in summer, when it's hottest, some proportionate declines.
So I don't know of any anecdotally, it just seems like there are fewer Europeans, and then 10 years ago, Europeans were pretty significant in July and August. Do you have anything that would back that up?
Great observation. So we have definitely seen a decline in international visitation since COVID, and that hasn't really fully come back yet. That's based on sort of broader national patterns. With respect to Grand County specifically, we don't really have an excellent handle on exactly what's happened at the international segment. They're harder to track. You need to do a survey because mobility data doesn't capture a lot of international cell phones. But my suspicion is that you're absolutely right.
You think you could get it back from like credit card information?
Yes, okay, thank you. That is another source that does have that. And yeah, so yes, that is a good indicator of what's going on.
But in
Yeah.
general, we're back to domestic travel at pre-COVID levels on the international for this year. It's estimated at about 70%. So that return has been certainly slower on that international side than the domestic.
We have coming later on in the presentation, we have a slide of international business spending statewide. Yeah, it's like it's just
Another, maybe it's in some future slide, but another data source that we have going back quite a few years is traffic on Highway 180. There's some traffic counters that have been placed one time. And if you plot that out, I think what you see over the last 6 or 7 years is continued significant growth in spring and fall, and it's really flattening out in the summer, just last 5 years, so it's something you might want to fold into the.
Perfect. And thank you for, the credit card data is tracked by Ben and Sky. So that's, we do have that on hand. We should fold that in. Yeah, thank you.
The strength of the US dollar is also. CS for international travel. It's easy for us to travel.
It'd be really nice to have quantitative, like you mentioned overall, I think you said European travel's 70% of pre-COVID, but just, it's one thing to notice, generally there are fewer Europeans coming here in the summer, but expressing that as a percentage of our overall visitation or sales or that kind of thing, I think would be helpful because it helps how much of a priority should that be for us?
Terrific. Thank you. With respect to jobs and wages, so one interesting thing is there's been a 42% increase in jobs covered by unemployment insurance, which is probably 20% of jobs. But the population is just growing about 2% according to the US Census. That probably indicates, other data indicates that there's been a lower unemployment rate, so we're working for labor force participation. Also for in communities, other counties. Maybe there's other factors. Help explain that discrepancy there. Job growth in the past 10 years has been greater in non-tourism sectors than tourism sectors. So just taking a rough sort of categorization of tourism as comprising retail, trade, lodging, restaurants, federal government, and functions. That's grown by about 37% over the past 10 years. Sure. Everything else in the private sector has grown by 68%, indicating that there has been some diversification. Average wages do tend to be higher in non-tourism sectors at about an average of 50,000 per year. In the tourism sector, the average about 36,000. But growth wages, average wages is faster in tourism. Overall growth in the past 10 years has been about 55% in tourism sectors as compared to 27% in non-tourism sectors. There's also significant seasonality in jobs, but again, as we saw with retail sales or gradual moderation of that seasonality in jobs. Again, we just got one graph on jobs in that forward deck, but this just shows quarterly sort of trailing 12-month jobs and average wages over the past 10 years, shown on a quarterly basis. You can see that steady growth in jobs in the blue bars, and then growth in average wages, both in nominal terms in orange and then inflation adjusted terms in gray. Overall, 42% growth in jobs, rocks, 52% growth in average wage, 60% growth in inflation adjusted wage. So again, overall, the wage and job data indicate a healthy growing economy. But in most current quarters, there's sort of been off, even a slight decline in jobs in the most recent 3 quarters. So sort of that's weighted wages. Related to things like housing issues and things.
So would be interesting to see that same thing for other counties in Utah or Western Colorado, just to know whether that modest increase we've seen is leading the pack or trailing the pack.
We'll be sure to include that. Yeah, we have looked at how sales compare, and for instance, look at lodging sales. We see that Moab has comparative, for instance, Washington County and Sonoma County. Those have actually outperformed, having had even more growth than Grand County in terms of lodging sales. 3 counties have had similar growth in restaurant sales in the last 10 years. But traffic counts. So as you pointed out, there's certainly a peak of travel in April and May, and September, October, which we catch well with lodging demands, as mentioned, so we show here there's certainly a weekend variation. Big inflow on Fridays, all flow Sundays, 25% delta there compared to Monday. And then total annual traffic on that counter just north of town dropped 6.6%, 2021 to 2022. Dip 2022 to 2023. We'll see this next slide kind of shows those patterns. So yeah, this shows the green line shows the percentage change in travel, average daily traffic, 2023 or 2024. That's tips all months, and then as you can see, the orange 2024 2023. See those. Right here, here's a prior year. So it bounce back in January, February, and March. So yeah, that's right. Activity to the other sources of travel as well.
So let's just touch briefly on sort of the overall vitality of the tourism sector. And if we first take a look at what's been happening on the hotel side, and I want to go back to what Jeremy is going to talk about this a little bit more, but when we try and look at what's happened in that lodging side sector and how that relates to visitation at the key parks, you brought this up and we concur. Part of that, we have to be careful in terms of when we're comparing 2023 to, and what is it to sort of the peak in 21 when everything spiked, or more to a 2019 sort of at pre-COVID. So if you look at the aggregate mix of parks, 21 to 23, we're down by about 16%. So there has been a drop off in park visitation to those key top period when everyone was getting out of that COVID time period and you had the big surge. But then if you look back to the performance back into a pre-COVID 2019 period of time, we're essentially pretty flat. There were fewer visitors to Arches in 23, but very importantly, there was an increase that was experienced in Canyonlands and Dead Horse. So we were pretty consistent in terms of aggregate park visitation as we compare and contrast back to performance in 2019. As David talked about, one of the few sectors that did see a decline was a 4% drop in demand for hotel rooms when we compare 23 back to 21. There was a slight increase in rates and inventory, and that led to about a 3% drop in occupancy as you compare 21 to 23. David noted that we are comparing and benchmarking that to a variety of others, and essentially those occupancy rates for Moab were pretty much in line with some of the key competitors. One of the areas that we've talked a lot about is the growth in the short-term rentals. Of the over 1,000 vacation rentals, 18% of those were added between 21 and this should be 2022. Yep. And occupancies declined here by about 6%. And that really reinforces the interest of a lot of those folks choosing a short-term rental experience over a hotel. That also influenced, you'll remember back when Kathy was talking about the restaurateurs concerned about some of the declining demand that they're seeing. And as we see more of these folks choosing short-term rentals and saying we're going to be cooking more of our meals in our own location, that's certainly been one of the factors. We were asked to look at not just short-term rentals within Grand County, but also in San Juan. And that's an important addition, but that adds about another 25% of inventory to those short-term rentals. So it's not just that inventory that exists in Grant County. San Juan County adds a pretty significant percentage of that as well.
And when you say San Juan County, do you mean all of it or just South?
All of it, so
Spanish
we didn't just focus on the northern part. I think that's where the bulk of the ones where we were looking at that as an overall county. Just graphically, you can see what we were talking about when we're comparing to 21, that 16% decline in aggregate park visitation, but essentially flat. If you compare that back to 2019, that pre-COVID period of time, the 4% decline in room night demand, the 6% decline in vacation rentals. So again, we were peaking there in that post COVID as we came out of 2020, and we've moderated since that point. But even with those declines, the taxable sales numbers that David talked about were still up about 4% there, with traffic being down 9% as we compare back to 21. That's a really important point, that even though you look at park visitation and some of the declines, when you look at taxable sales up 48%, and that shows part of that is sort of inflation and those kinds of factors, but certainly from a tax standpoint, you've been able to weather those changes very effectively. Just focus over on the right hand side of this chart. So again, in 23 as compared to 21, a little bit of an increase in supply, but very importantly, we're comparing this back to not 2020, as that was the period of COVID, but as you will remember, we had very big, significant increases in that supply of hotel rooms that were coming on in 2020. So if you compare 2023 to 2020, there was almost a 13% increase in hotel rooms. So you did have this very significant increase, much of that in 2020. It's softened here in the last 2 years. But with that, there's been not only this increase in supply, but the demand decreases, and that's resulted in occupancy declines. And that's somewhat unique, that many other destinations have been able to hold occupancies. Your ADR growth here at 1.2%. We've seen other destinations experience significantly stronger gains in that average daily rate. But a lot of this is because you had so much new inventory come online, and the competitive realities that has faced. So those hoteliers, if you're looking at that revenue per available room, has seen about a 3% decline from what they were experiencing back in 2021. This just benchmarks, and you can see at that top level with Grant County at 63%. You can see Mesa and Sedona a little bit higher. You can see Summit County a little lower. But most importantly, if you take a look at those average daily rates, you can see some of the very significant overperformance in destinations like Sedona and Summit County, Teton County, as compared to Grant. If you shift into short-term rentals, again, just focusing on that right-hand side, very, very significant increase in that inventory, 18% increase since 2021. And while that supply has increased, we've had a demand decrease of about 6%, and it's resulted in occupancy declines of 11%. And frankly, this is something, again, we've seen around the country as we came out of COVID. We had a lot of investment interest in these short-term rentals that really peaked that expansion as we went into 21 and 22. Some of those investors are getting disillusioned because they aren't experiencing the kind of occupancy and performance trends they had initially performed, and some of that inventory is coming back into more traditional uses. But certainly you were part of the trend that was happening nationally with the very significant increase in short-term rentals. If we look at back, yeah.
I'm just, in most of the slides you've shown, you've often shown like a graph for multiple years, like starting in 2016 or 2011. These last few slides have just been comparing it to 2021, which, 2021 was an atypical. It'd be great if, I think a lot of those data sources are available for every year. It's seeing the bar graph, I think is more useful than just 2-year comparison.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
The,
we didn't have a comparison for 2019. That was where we were.
Okay, so your
Yeah.
data, for those things, your data doesn't go back
Yeah,
that far.
right.
It's not available.
I
So,
see.
but maybe we. talk
We
to
can,
the
we can look in
about-
terms of if we can go back,
Yeah.
On the.
I think some of the star data is, I've seen it like at least 10 years.
It certainly is the short-term rentals with some of the data sources that we have been using. We'll look into that, but understand your point there, getting that longer historic.
Because one thing when I've looked at it in the past, one thing that's striking is the occupancy is like almost flat over 10 to 12 years. And even though our
Yeah.
supply has gone up quite a bit, so that it's worth knowing.
Right, that mid-60,
And if you look at this one, you're really pretty much in line with a lot of your competitors. Summit County's occupancy, that blue line across the top. You're at 63.2. That's pretty much in range with Teton County, Wyoming, Washington County, Utah, Mesa County, Colorado, where you see those big swings with the short-term rentals.
Yeah, no, those kinds of comparisons with other cities are also great, and that's something. But I think there's sort of a time axis, like going back years for Grand County, but there's us comparing us with similar communities, and both of those I think are super useful to see, and are often, but they just take a little bit more extra work to compile, so we often don't see that bigger picture. So I'm glad you're doing it, and I'm encouraging you to do even more of it. If there's a version 2 of this.
very good, but I think you're right. Basically, that occupancy, you'll see room night demand increasing pretty significantly. An increase in supply and keeping that occupancy somewhere in that low to mid 60 kind of range is the typical numbers. And just real quickly, and we touched about on this in terms of those short-term rentals. You can see San Juan County adding to the inventories in Grand County, but about 3/4 to 1/4 is the general mix there. And you can see significant revenue gains. One point I didn't pull out here, but a very significant difference in terms of ADRs in those short-term rentals. That they're achieving a much higher average daily rate than those of the hotel side. So there's certainly an important revenue component for the county.
And again, this is all of San Juan County that we're looking at.
Correct, yes, yeah. And we might see if we can make an estimate of what percentage of those would be in the more northern regions. Jeremy?
Yeah, and just a few more quick points on state national park visitation. We could some key takeaways, things we've learned about our thank you about Archer. So kind of background before the time entry system was this recognition across the area of this rapid increase in Archer's visitation, growing by 73% from the time of 2010 to 2021, recognizing that there was frequent necessities to close the gates, increasing perceptions of crowding going on by visitors that are there, just increasing overall concern by park administration of what's going on in the park. They're generating this then impetus to initiate a piloted timed entry system, as COVID was also an undertaking, and then now potentially identifying what those opportunities might look like in the future as they move forward in terms of visitor use management, whether or not a timed entry system or some other kind of system is necessary, or a reversion back to almost a first come first serve basis. You get in, it's great. If not, you're out. And so in 2022, folks at the park, Amy Tendrick, as well as others in the region, Zach Miller, who was with the Park Service, who's now at BLM, did some work looking at the effects of a time entry system on park visitation and visitor experiences. If you haven't seen it, it's a great read. It's on the IRMA website, data stored from the Park Service itself. But overall, looking at that, 85% of those visitors that were surveyed backed keeping a time entry system. This was done by surveys that were conducted in the park by OTAC and then some of our other partners as well. but looking at those perceptions of that, they compared perceptions of crowding between 2022 and 2021 as well. There's 2 reports that are out there. So, but basically what that tells us, if they got in and got their tickets, there was a quality experience that's going on there. They also noted in the Amy Tendricks paper about looking at people per view at given key areas. So looking at Delicate Arch, looking at Sand Dune Arch, any other key locations that are out there in the park, and whether or not those views were exceeding kind of the expected norms up there. And during the timed entry system, they did not see those pieces exceeding those people per viewscape that's there. They were not seeing the massive crowding in the parking lots at those spaces. They're timed out better across the day as compared to what was going on pre timed entry system. So they had some overall senses of positive experiences in the park to those pieces that are there. And of course, that's only one component of it, was what they're experiencing, what the visitors are experiencing. But then the flip side of that is, what does the community around the park also experience that's there. And what we also did see is while there was a drop off in the comparison period of 2016 2019, so pre-COVID, as that trend was going up in park visitation, to 2022, park was down about 9.4%. An immediate knee-jerk reaction is that's got to be because of the time entry system that caused that drop. But what we do see is on that slide there, so we do see the overall increases from arches increasing as we're going through there. A big drop off in COVID, coming back up, a large bump, and then some tapering back off there, and then kind of flattening out on there, not quite regaining that trend line going up. And some would say that's good, some would say that's a struggle. That I guess it yet remains to be seen. But what's good, and I think Kathy mentioned this earlier, is kind of that aggregate on that top side there is starting to trend back up. So there's some opportunities to substitute away from an arches experience towards other pieces out of there, and still coming and experiencing the overall piece. What we also want to do is not think about what's going on in arches in isolation of what's going on outside of arches. Yes, time entry system is one piece of what's going on, but there's a broader economy that's happening around arches as well, nationwide, worldwide. If we look at what happens in arches, so that left-hand side there is arches, a 9.4% drop in 2022 compared to an average of 16 to 19. And we see that that's right in the middle of most of the larger Western parks across the park system that's there. So nothing to suggest in this case that there's an extreme event going on in arches that's causing a massive decline. We also see, as Mitch mentioned earlier, there's that small bump up in Canyonlands there, about 5.2%. A few other parks did see positive experiences there. But on average, arches falls right in line with what was being experienced across the West and larger parks. We know from previous experiences and previous studies that these larger Western parks, as being largely dry markets, like remember back to the 3.3 days in Moab compared to 9.7 day overall trip, that these are dry market destinations. We know that visitation fluctuates with gas prices. We know that visitation fluctuates with consumer confidence. We know that visitation fluctuates with the overall expense and of that travel. So putting that kind of perspective on that case, we can start to imagine all the different influences that affect visitation. And importantly, getting back to Commissioner Walker's thought earlier about that international travel, you can see from the Visit Utah dashboards, looking at international visits and spending, just tanking there in the COVID years there down into 2020, 2021, starting to rebound in 2022. And as Mitch alluded to earlier, expectations are 70%, right, coming up here soon. So we're still not back to where we were, but we start to see that bounce. That still remains to be seen of how that will unfold. And of course, those broader macroeconomic conditions will play into those results from that. Right. And so now we go on to some more the additional assets and infrastructure that are out there and about in the community. And I wanted to include this to kind of put in perspective where Grand County is in relationship to some of these other communities that we looked at to see how they're faring. And if you look up at the top there, this graphic is organized from top to bottom in ascending order of county population. If we look at the Grand County population, about 10,000 folks, we compare that to Washington County at almost approaching 200,000 folks. So there's a large disparity in what the population looks like. Population plays out across regional economics pretty readily and pretty consistently. As population increases, economic diversity often also increases. When we see smaller populations of a county, oftentimes we're starting to see more specialization going on. In the case of Grand County right now, that specialization comes back into play around travel and tourism. And if you think way back, hour and a half ago almost now, to what Mitch had mentioned about residents and their sense of having about 47% of them say that they are in tourism dependent jobs, so households dependent upon tourism. The data shows almost exactly that same number. 48% of employment is based in tourism, travel and tourism dependent industries. So the recognition of residents matches up with what the data itself also says. Pieces that have become really interesting and really concerning was also voiced by everybody in the community, as well as those ownership costs and ownership availability as well. Here we can see that looking at the second to the right column there, rental costs exceeding 30% of household income, and then one over ownership costs exceeding 30% of household income. So 30% is a good marker of if you're below 30%, it's more likely to be economically secure as a household. You start to put a lot more money towards your house, become a lot more vulnerable to ebbs and flow of your own household economy. So Grand County, in terms of ownership costs, exceeds all these other counties that's there as well. In terms of 45% of home ownership is exceeding 45% on that measure that's there. So we go to the next slide on here.
So the rental cost, am I reading that right? Is that we have a lower rental cost?
According to this data, yes.
So interesting.
Lower on there.
So rental as a percentage is
May include your trailers, your motorhomes.
That might be something, though, that we take a little closer, what might be influencing that sort of dichotomy as it relates to general costs. That's a good point to delve into a little bit more.
And we do jump into this a bit more too on rental availability in this case. So this is a figure. So the Kim Gardner Institute, again, it's a great resource you guys have here out of Utah, has started, and this is their beta version, so it's still a developing dashboard that they have. But looking at rental availability, rental need, and rental costs moving out as well. And we can see on these graphics, so there are two graphics on the middle and the left-hand side. If you sum those up, you get to the graphic on the right-hand side there. So for those folks that are at 30% or less of the area median income, we're short 468 units, right? So we have essentially 16 units available and a demand of 484 units. And that demand is based on being able to afford that house, right? So substantial amount of drag there. So we hit our trough though at about 527 short units for those that are 40% or below the area median income. And that's to be able to get into a house that they can afford, which affordability would be paying your rents at a rate of less than 30% of your median income. So suggesting there's substantial constraints to the rental market as well on that piece. Going into more about the economic diversity. So as I mentioned earlier, as your population is smaller, your diversity is oftentimes lower as well. We can see it on a whole nationwide. Utah does outstanding in terms of its economic diversity, scoring a score of 90, almost 96 there, where 100 is excellent diversity. And then as you get closer to zero, your diversity goes down. You become more and more dependent on a singular industry or set of industries. I can see on the right-hand side, based on county levels, that the higher the population, so at Salt Lake County, the Washington counties, those tend to score better on that diversity, and you get more and more dependent as you get lower and lower populations of those. And Grand County, if I can read that from over here, is at almost 45% on the scale. So not at the lowest of ends, but right there in kind of the middle ground of that diversity. Getting to our next piece then, this probably comes as no surprise about just the volume of public lands that are in Grand County itself, and comparing that to some of these other ones that we looked at. Mono County, which was also a really low population county in California, which is where Mammoth Lakes is located, right next to Yosemite. So also a big tourism, outdoor recreation dependent location. Large percent of these are federal lands. So there's often a narrative out there that public land portions reduce economic vitality. That doesn't always hold true. There's certainly studies out there that suggest the right public lands that have the ability to create an amenity-driven economy can create economic vitality throughout there. But it's a piece to be aware of what some opportunities, challenges are, what some barriers may be, but then also how can we put those to productive use in terms of continue to grow this outdoor rec economy, continue to facilitate the sectors of the economy that are strong and can be stronger and under the right conditions, the right efforts, and in moderation with what else is going on.
And we'll just jump into this last one. So just to sort of capture a bunch of other indicators. Overall community health. American Association for Retired People. It's high, good or bad? So this purpose is to capture essentially measures that apply not just to older folks, but people in general. So you can see Grand County for overall score across all these different sub-indices of Grand County scores, very similar to some of Washington counties and quite a bit above Median County. And then you can see across breakdown here, Moab, Median, Moab scores above list. Or equal to his transportation. Grand County does better than the U.S. median county. You can see for health, Grand County 79 versus 40 for the U.S. Engagement 82 for Grand versus 43. So Grand County does especially well there. So health, for instance, includes things like Grand County does great in terms of access to exercise, low obesity rate, low smoking prevalence, and then also measuring of health care delivery. Engagement scores very well due to things like just the number of nonprofit and sort of organizations who provide opportunities for involvement, as well as social and cultural entertainment opportunities, as well as help actual social engagement by people in terms of their actual actions. This should all be taken with a large lump of salt, given that the indicators that underlie these indices are obviously just a subset of all measures that could be used to sort of measure these items, and ARP has the full detail. But we just thought this was a good way of sort of taking a quick snapshot, admittedly high level, admittedly overgeneralized of some of the strengths, sort of the status of Grand County, various measures.
Almost done.
Wrap this up and put this in context for you. We thought we would share a slide from a study that Destinations International completed. It's with tourism economics. It's called Destination Promotion, Catalyst for Community Vitality. And it really puts everything that we shared with you this morning into the context of what your opportunity is. We see that your economic vitality, your sustainable economic vitality is intimately connected to your natural amenities. Unlike many places, you can leverage these natural resources as a cornerstone for both tourism and economic diversification. And that's really your path to a resilient and thriving economy to the future. Then your job becomes stewarding that cycle. Once you create that, which is frequently thought of as a community vitality wheel. And so the idea is, if you build a place that people want to visit, then you built a place where people want to live. And that sort of it circles to, if you build that place where people want to live, then you build a place where people want to work. And if you build that place where people want to work, then you build a place where business and residents want to invest. And if you build a place to enhance business and where residents will invest, then you build a place where people will work to visit, will want to visit. That's how you create that virtuous cycle that leads to thriving economic health. The work we have ahead of us is to tell you and advise you on how best to accomplish this and to do it in a way that is realistic about the capacity of your destination to handle additional growth and to handle the additional visitation. And as you heard us say earlier in this presentation, there are ways to target more effectively around the kind of people that you most want to have show up here and who most fit into the culture that you've created here in Green County. So that's what's up next. Any questions about this avalanche of information we've shared with you today?
Drinking from the fire hose, huh?
When you said that's what's up next, you mean like in the coming months or weeks or something?
Well, yes, the ideation session, it will follow on here. We've just about kept to our time schedule. I'm a little amazed. We're supposed to start about 10:30 today. Our steering committee will be meeting to go over some, what we're going to be proposing is the framework for the strategic plan. And then we'll be doing a community forum tonight, sharing sort of a modified version of some of what we'll be sharing with the group, with the steering committee today. And then that will prep us for going off and actually turning this into a plan.
So the steering committee is going to be helping us generate ideas and thoughts of how do we address, how do we think creatively about how some of these opportunities, some of these challenges, and how might we best. And as you'll recall, we worked hard in identifying those right folks on the steering committee to help give a diverse mix of perspectives. So we're looking forward to a good session later on today with them.
All right, thank you guys so much. Any other last thoughts or questions for these? All right, then I'll close this special meeting and we'll see you at the steering committee meeting in 25 minutes.